This may be the most important consideration in deciding what to eat. In short, stop eating ultra-processed food. So today we're going to talk about what that is and why it doesn't work, and I'll give you a hint. What it is junk, and the reason it doesn't work is that your body is too smart. I'm going to explain this in a way that's super easy to follow and super easy to understand. And I'm going to give you some information because otherwise I wouldn't have a video, would I? Ultra-processed food makes up roughly 73% of the American food supply, which is just alarming. Some ultra-processed foods are obvious, like snacky junk food, sodas, and cereals, but you'd be surprised by some of the things you might think of as healthy that are actually ultra-processed junk. Now, if you want an easy way to tell the difference, I'll tell you about something called the NOVA classification system, which has actually set a standard for different levels of processing, which is really useful since it keeps us from slipping into a situation where people are just kind of applying their own perceptions willy-nilly, and that can lead to a lot of disinformation, confusion, and opportunities for manufacturers to pull a fast one on you, and oh, believe me, they can. And they do. There are a lot of great online resources for this, and I'm not going to endorse any particular one because they're all easy to find and most are pretty reliable. Just do an image search on NOVA food classification. That's N-O-V-A, NOVA food classification, and you'll find lots of really easy to read charts that very clearly describe things. Now, just to give you a preview, they divide foods into 4 categories that are pretty intuitive and easy to understand. Level 1 is unprocessed or minimally processed foods. I like to think of these as things that don't have an ingredient list because they're just one thing. The best things in the grocery store are the ones that don't list their ingredients and don't have a label. Of course, I'm talking about produce and protein. I'm not going to get into the weeds about whether meat is good for you later. But for now, suffice to say that a pound of chuck is a better choice than a boxed meal. Fish, eggs, broccoli, almonds, apples, beans, super easy. Can't go wrong. Level 2 is sometimes called ingredients or processed ingredients. These are things that are derived directly from level 1 foods through things like drying, pressing, milling, or grinding. So stuff like oils, fats, sugar, syrup, coffee, and even salt. Now, level 3 foods are called processed foods, even though we're generally still pretty safe here. In level 3, we're talking about canned vegetables and meats, artisanal breads, preserves, cheese, pickles, smoked meats, beer, and wine. These are things that have been made with level 1 and level 2 foods with the possible addition of salt or fats or sugars, and may have been fermented, smoked, or pickled. Now, level 4 is the one to avoid and the topic of our show here. Level 4 is ultra-processed foods, and these should be eaten either very, very, very sparingly or not at all. If these are the bulk of your diet, I would strongly recommend you make a change. Level 4 foods have very little intact ingredients from level 1 foods. They're often defined as formulations, and that alone should tell you something. These are things that you could not make for yourself because you don't have access to the ingredients or the technology, both in terms of know-how and also the equipment needed. This group includes commercial soft drinks, fast food, boxed dinners, most frozen dinners, cereals, snack foods, instant soups, and really anything called a nugget. In fact, let's start with nuggets, just to explain what we're talking about. I'm assuming that you're already aware of the fact that there is no part of a chicken's anatomy that is the nugget. To make a nugget, you first have to make a paste. To do that, you choose which parts of the bird you want to keep and which ones to toss. Different manufacturers have different standards for which parts of the bird to put into the paste. I think it's safe to say that they generally get rid of the feathers, but they keep other parts of the bird that you might not want to think about too hard. The keeper bits, whatever those end up being, get ground up and have any number of things added to them, and every manufacturer has their own special list that can contain anything from salt to emulsifiers, various flavoring agents, hidden sugars, and whatever it takes to make the nugget as palatable as possible. Palatability is an important concept in industrial food. In fact, it's pretty much the main goal. They want to light up all your pleasure receptors as soon as you eat it. There's no acquired taste here, no refined palate. They need you to love it at first bite. They also aim for what they call craveability, which is a desire for more and more and more and more. What they don't want you to feel is satisfaction, because the minute you're satisfied is the minute you stop spending money. You might remember during the tobacco wars, we learned that cigarettes had been engineered to give you just the right dose of nicotine to make you want another smoke in about 30 minutes. Well, ultra-processed food has the same objective in similar science, so their literal teams of scientists make sure that you love the thing right away and that you crave another one as soon as you swallow the last one. What they don't want is for you to lean back in your chair, pat your belly, and say, "Wow, that was really good." Nope. They want you thinking about that next bag before the last bite has even made it to your stomach. So next step is to inject the paste into a mold so that the size and shape of your nugget is not only consistent, but also to make it a perfect bite. By making each nugget the perfect size, they make it as easy to eat as possible. And this is what the marketers refer to as removing friction. Friction is any little thing where you are required to put effort into using a product, and it applies to the marketing of everything from websites to apps to grocery stores. One of my favorite examples is cereal that's already in a little disposable bowl. Apparently, we're at a point now where we can't even be bothered to pour our sugar flakes into a bowl. Wow. And not to be outdone, Team Nugget has engineered a bite of food that is as perfect as possible, and once they have been injected, pressed, extruded, or transported into the molds and then released, they get breaded and fried. That breading has been designed to give you the perfect crunch every time, not too much residue on your delicate, discerning, discriminating little fingies. And much like the paste, the breading is deeply engineered and often has an ingredient list to rival a Tolstoy novel. They have chemicals in there to deliver a perfect crunch. They have chemicals in there to deliver a perfect color. They have chemicals in there to keep all the flavors the same from one bite to the next. They have chemicals in there to ensure the distribution of the other chemicals. Both the paste and the breading are perfect places for embedding sugars. And embedding sugar is really important to the industry because sugar lights up your brain like bonus points on a pinball machine and increases craveability. Now, sometimes, a lot of the time, they don't want you to actually taste the sugar. They just want all the neurochemical bells and whistles without adding to the sweetness. So, enter maltodextrin, a sugar that doesn't taste particularly sweet. When you eat it, your brain still gets the same nutritive reward as if you had eaten a bunch of table sugar. And if you want a refresher on nutritive reward, make sure to go back and re-watch my video on the joy factor. This is a very effective and sneaky way to increase craveability because of the brain's unique relationship to sugar. Now, if you ask the food industry, they'll tell you that the purpose of maltodextrin is to add bulk. But let's be honest here, there are other ways to add bulk. This one just so happens to light up your brain like a slot machine on an 8-ball. And then the packaging. Whether you bought your nugs from a fast food joint or a grocery store, you can rest assured that your delivery system has been engineered to remove as much friction as possible. A box that's also a tray that also has a little holder for your little sauce cup. And if it's for your kids, some graphics and text to help you make them shut up and eat. We live in an amazing world. Now, not all ultra-processed food is made from paste. Sometimes it's made from a slurry. A slurry is kind of like a paste, but much thinner. Slurry is magic because you can shape your food into whatever you want. You can make cereal into the shape of a beloved cartoon character. You can make a potato chip that stacks up to a perfect snack stack. You can make noodles that are pinwheels or geometric shapes or even one particular food of my childhood that my parents wanted to believe was actually teaching me the alphabet. Ultra-processed food is nothing if not literate. Another great thing about that slurry is that it can contain nearly anything. Anything. And whatever that anything is something that you cannot make at home. You wouldn't know where to get most of the ingredients. Take a stroll through the grocery store sometime and ask one of their very helpful store associates where you can find a jar of emulsifier E471 or Anodonorbixen. And even if you could get your hands on those things, you wouldn't have the know-how nor the equipment to inject it into the mix in just the right way at just the right time. You wouldn't know what to do with a tablespoon of maltodextrin if your nuggets depended on it. Slurry is so flexy. Slurry can be baked, flash-fried, slow-cooked, braised, glazed, deep-fried, freeze-dried, extruded, injected, molded, and made into just about anything your imagination can cook up, so don't dream it. Be it. There's a shape for just the shape you're in. One recurring theme of ultra-processed food is the process of breaking the ingredients down to their constituent parts and then reassembling them in a way that maximizes profits by way of maximizing its palatability and craveability while eliminating friction. And that, in my opinion, is exactly where things go wrong. Food is not just an ingredient list, and it most definitely is not a bag of chemicals. Your body is not a manufacturing facility where you load up all the parts over here and expect a reliable result over here. Your body is a network of systems that all work together, pass information back and forth with intelligence at every transaction. Your cells are not dumb little vending machines. Your bones talk to your kidneys talk to your fat cells talk to your brain. One of the early examples of ultra-processed food is white bread. When white bread first became widely available, people loved it because it was fluffy and highly palatable. Problem was, the steel rollers it was made with were stripping away a lot of the nutrition in the process of making that ultra-palatable white flour. So they started adding vitamins back in. Now, just as a point of trivia, enriching a processed food restores the missing nutrients to their original levels, whereas fortifying increases those nutrients to a level higher than the original. And problem is, it doesn't work. Synthetic vitamins are usually not as usable as nutrients in their native and original form. Your body just doesn't absorb them in the same way. If you watched Food Revolution number 5, you might remember the story about the early European settlers on this continent having trouble raising food here because the native bees didn't want to pollinate the European plants. It wasn't a matter of snobbery. The American bees had simply never seen those plants before, and so their evolutionary instincts had no roadmap, no instructions, no clue that these plants were food, and so it wasn't until the Europeans brought their own bees across the pond that they could count on pollination to take place. Now, are you seeing the trend? Nature doesn't understand parts. Imagine if you took apart something as simple as a toaster and then put all the parts into a bag. It wouldn't work. You have all the parts, but you don't have the instructions. You don't have the information. You just have a bag of parts. Now, there's a concept in the food world known as nutritionism. Nutritionism is the notion that food is basically just a collection of chemicals and that you can gain all the nutrition benefits from that food so long as you put all those chemicals in your body. Nutritionism assumes that food is just the sum of its parts. And it turns out it doesn't work. Food is not just a bag of chemicals any more than a toaster is just a bag of parts. And in the same way, your body is not just a collection of organs. Your body is a network of systems that trade in information and collaboration. And as it turns out, real food works the same way. And this is why ultra-processed food is so nefarious. The manufacturers can enrich and fortify their products and proudly put on their label that it exceeds the USRDA of all your vitamins and minerals and is part of a healthy breakfast. But all they're selling you is a bag of chemicals, plus a heaping serving of embedded sugars and emulsifiers. They're selling you a bag of chemicals that have been scientifically engineered to be more palatable and more craveable than real food, and your body has no idea what to do with it. This isn't just speculation, by the way. A 30-year study of 200,000 adults, mostly healthcare professionals, found that those who ate the most ultra-processed foods were 11% more likely to develop cardiovascular disease and 16% more likely to develop coronary heart disease and had a slightly elevated occurrence of stroke. But when the numbers from this study were aggregated with the results of 19 other studies for a combined sample of 1.25 million adults, those numbers were even higher. 17% increase in cardiovascular disease, a 23% increase in coronary heart disease, and a 9% higher incidence of stroke. Those are not insignificant numbers. The researchers had to admit that not all ultra-processed foods are the same. They used different techniques and ingredients, and it was impossible to correct for that. But they did establish that the worst offenders were sugary soft drinks like soda and processed meats like bacon, breaded fish, and lunch meat. On the other end of the scale, it may be that other types of processed foods might be more benign, like cereals and breads and yogurts, but there is a lot of variation among those categories, and I simply cannot in good conscience tell you that a sugar-laden, ultra-processed food of any kind is a good choice. I'm just trying to report to you in good faith. One possible explanation is that some of the foods, even though they were nothing like healthy level 1 foods, did contain things like fiber, albeit fiber with a big sugar hit. At the end of the day, it's important to keep in mind what food is and what it is not. A lot of additives like emulsifiers, preservatives, and nitrites are known carcinogens. Foods loaded with sugar are unhealthy for their own reasons, and you don't need a 30-year study to tell you that. You also don't need a researcher to tell you that foods become less healthy when robbed of their fiber and micronutrients, even when artificial nutrients get thrown in for the sake of making the nutrition label look more convincing. The takeaway is this: get a basic understanding of the NOVA classification system. It's not that hard. As much as possible, stay with the level 1 and 2 foods. Level 3 foods have their place and can definitely be part of a healthy diet. Level 4 foods should be avoided. Listen, none of us is perfect. Sometimes I love that junk, but that's what it is. It's junk, and I know it. Every now and then, you got to do what you got to do, but every now and then, do not make it a regular thing. One rule I made for myself when I decided to really take my health seriously was this: I let myself eat anything that I either made myself or could if I tried. So like a locally made cookie from the coffee shop, no problem. I'm sure if I had the recipe, I could make something like it, and so could you. But a cookie from a box with a cartoon character on it? Nope. A homemade burger with my own sourdough? Sure. A drive-through meal with who knows what in it? Nope. A homemade omelet? Absolutely. An egg sandwich from the place with the clown for a spokesperson? Absolutely not. That year, my belly shrank from being tight in a 38 to being loose in a 32, which was my college size. I did other things too, but that rule is one I still mostly live by. This whole video was pretty cursory, but the topic is really important. Possibly the most important thing you need to know to eat healthy. And we're going to talk a lot more about this in the future, but for now, it's time to wrap up this video. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Ciao.